I can look at it and go like, ew, okay, that's a gross behavior. They're all related to avoiding the feeling of shame for me. And I think that's probably true for most people. Shame is a massive driving force of an emotion that makes us do all kinds of things that we're not proud of.
If I'm blaming, I won't get compassion. I won't be able to give it to myself because I'm going to be expecting it to be cured from something beyond myself.
It's the self-limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I will never be good enough. I'm not loved. No one loves me. No one wants to be my friend.
So often we think we're unique. We're the only one going through this. We're the only ones who's had these things happen to us. But that's really not the case. And just knowing that there's other people out there that are going through the same thing that I am, it definitely doesn't make it easier for me. It doesn't make it just simply go away.
Welcome to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. You're hanging out at the intersection of emotional wellness, personal growth, and living an alcohol-free life. Here we share everything we've learned and continue to learn about how to be happy, no alcohol needed.
Hello and welcome everybody to the No Alcohol Needed podcast. So happy to have you guys here with us today. Welcome especially to our listeners and also to Robbie and Matt who are joining us today. We do want to remind you guys, you can read bios for Robbie and for Matt and for all of the other guests that we have here on our website at noalcoholneeded.net. So make sure you check that out. You can find links for everything that they're doing in the recovery community and get to know them there. And yeah, today we are going to talk a little bit about the dark side, which I think is, I don't know, maybe a little scary. We haven't ever broached this subject in quite this way before on the podcast. So it should be a really interesting conversation. So there's a lot of talk about shadow work going around on the internet lately. And we decided that it's worth talking about. So we know we all have a dark side. Things that we're not proud of, things that we've done, things that we do that we're kind of ashamed of, that we try to keep hidden away, not talk about. So what is the dark side exactly? This is where we're talking about like your shadow self, flaws, imperfections, mistakes that you make, really unhealthy emotional reactions and behaviors. It's the side of you that you don't want anyone else to see, the side of you don't want to acknowledge. And probably the side that also needs the most compassion. And so we know our listeners are definitely going to relate to the idea of the dark side. And we want to talk about what it looks like to actually face it and what it looks like to integrate it into our lives. And also how we can learn from our dark side, learn from the scary stuff so that we can be healthier versions of ourselves going forward. So let's dive into this by just talking about our dark sides.
You were talking about the dark side and how we don't like to talk about the dark side. So we're going to have a whole episode of pure silence because nobody wants to talk about it.
Oh, man.
What if you love the dark side?
You know,
Then I think you have other work to do.
I don't know. I think this is loving your dark side is where we're headed. That's the goal for this whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
That's what we're looking to
Yep.
do. I think Robbie's done a lot of dark side work lately, so this should be a really fun conversation. So tell me about your dark side. What's the stuff that is hard to look at, hard to talk about? What part of you do you mostly try to hide or not even acknowledge?
You know, for me, it's the self-limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I will never be good enough. I'm not loved. No one loves me. No one wants to be my friend. All of those pop up quite often. I could say since I started doing some shadow work, they don't pop up as much anymore. And when they do pop up, I'm right there to stop them. That's why I was saying I like to go to the dark side, because that's where all my growth has happened, in that dark side. With my shadow work, going back, I guess, to where, I can try to go back and find that where that self-limiting belief started is the hard part, though, because it's all factual. There's no emotions or feelings put into it. It's just straight up facts. And when you go to those facts, they hurt. They hurt really bad. And you want to I know for myself, I want to not feel the uncomfortableness of that. So I will start to put emotions or feelings to that, and I have to stop and go back and go, no, this is the facts. We're here. Then look forward to how to stop, those self-limiting beliefs that I have. And what I found that really works for me is like just lots of, I would just say mantras, stuff that makes me feel good. I am loved. I am worthy. Those simple things that I use throughout the day when I'm there and those things come up. It's going to be something I work on for probably the rest of my life. This shadow work stuff with the self-limiting beliefs. I don't know if I'll ever be able to rewire them. I'm trying, but I think when they come up, having the tools and being present, not to run from them, to sit with them, and not ask why all the time, but kind of move forward, then reflect. Some point in the day or some point in the week, which I'm not very good at, but I try to take steps when I get real anxious to try to reflect and why am I here? What's the problem? And a lot of times it goes back to those self-limiting beliefs.
Mhm. Definitely. Limiting beliefs are huge and really have a lot of power over us until we start figuring them out and even just starting to recognize them. What about you, either Steve or Matt? What does your dark side look like? What's some of the stuff you generally would try to avoid one way or another?
All right, well, I'll jump in here for a second with this, and
Okay.
I'm going to rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So shadow work. I heard this term, I don't know, maybe August, September timeframe. Never heard of it before. So when it was brought up, I did a little research with things. Carl Jung, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
most people know that name.
Yep.
So when I saw that he was kind of like the man behind this, or one of the main ones behind this, early 1900s. For those who don't know, like he played a role with it with the beginning of AA as well. So that kind of enabled me to tie these two things together to get a perspective of all this stuff. Because when I started looking more into this, right, this looks a lot like a fourth step to an extent of like discovery, like
Mm.
looking at
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And that's like about like more or less about your resentment, your fears, but then your role in life and those things of what you are. And it gave me the ability to kind of take a perspective to look at it that way. But like I struggled with this, to think about this stuff, because I'm kind of like, I had no idea where to go with much of this. But right, we're looking at like anger, jealousy, shame, guilt, fear, like the emotions, the things that bring up those emotions. And that's why I said it really ties in a lot for me of like what I did in my fourth step, to reflect and kind of get a perspective of that side of me that like you hid from people for a long time. And as like you said, some of the stuff we still do hide, but it's kind of discovering it and growing from it. Not really sure.
A lot of my lies were created to protect me from having to see those things at all, from protecting me from having to tell people the truth, protecting me from having to face my own consequences. That's what the lies are there for. So if I dig another level deeper, is, what do I really want? I want to feel like I belong. I'm looking for approval. I'm trying to be noticed, maybe. Maybe I want some respect. And because I don't really have a healthy way of trying to get it, I'm going to just respond to life in a way that essentially I don't know any better. That's the limiting belief that Robbie was talking about, but that's my response to the world. And so I tried to hide my need to be wanted. And I tried to hide my insecurity of self. And I did that by looking for approval. So one feeds the other. Chasing after that, generally speaking, especially if you're chasing shadow self, is a very empty proposition because no needs ever get met.
Mm-hmm.
Just discovered.
Right. And
I
that's
mean,
a big part of it is the discovering what's underneath it, right? So for me, all the shadow stuff, all the behaviors that like now I can look at it and go like, ew, okay, that's a gross behavior. I don't like the way that makes me feel. When I can call myself out on it, right? And I still do that. We all still have ways of responding in situations where we're like, okay, that was a really shitty way to handle that. And, if I look at them, they're all related to avoiding the feeling of shame for me. And I think that's probably true for most people. Shame is a massive driving force of an emotion that makes us do all kinds of things that we're not proud of because we are so afraid of feeling the emotion of shame. And I sat down and tried to make a list of some of my different shadow, like dark side behaviors. Negative self-talk is a big one. I would sit there and tell myself over and over that I was a stupid, worthless failure. And that's the kind of thing that I never in a million years would have said that out loud 4 years ago. I never would have told anyone this is what it sounds like inside my head. Right. But I would that would be a constant cycle. And definitely I was super guilty of judging other people and gossiping about other people. That was one of those behaviors. Right, right. Okay, so that's one of those behaviors we don't want to admit we do, right?
Yeah.
I certainly have much more control over that now than I did because I've done a whole lot of work on myself. But if I find myself judging other people now, I know enough to call it out and be like, okay, I'm obviously feeling really insecure right now. What's my problem? Because it has nothing to do with them, right? But I think that that's something many of us are guilty of. Another kind of shadow behavior was trying to manipulate other people. And Steve talked about this, manipulate other people into liking me or approving of me. So, and I had so many really creepy, gross ways of doing that I still don't like necessarily admitting. When my children were younger, I would try to make sure their behavior was perfect so that other people would think I was a good mom and respect me more. That's gross. Like that's a horrible way to parent, but it's also true. And the people pleasing and the we call it masking, trying to pretend that you are somebody that you're not in order to get other people to like you. That's a shadow behavior. So there's all these things. And I didn't know what shadow work was in the beginning of my recovery journey. But that's exactly what Steve and I started doing. That like as soon as we met and we really started talking, that's when I started saying like, I do this thing that's really embarrassing to admit when I'm in this situation. And that's shadow work. That's the dark side.
I think that's the best way to describe that. I do this thing that's really embarrassing to admit that I do. And then having a conversation about it, that was like, let's just take the filter off and see what the hell happens, right? Because you filter your words when you're having a conversation with someone. I don't filter myself near as much as I used to, but I used to filter everything I said because you're gonna judge me based on my past, and I'm lacking so much self-confidence. I'm also, if you were to ask me if I was self-confident, I would say, fuck yeah, I am. And back then, when I look at it now, no, I wasn't at all. I avoided responsibility like it was the plague. And I thought I was taking on responsibility. I thought I was responsible for a lot of stuff. Nothing important.
Right.
I was responsible for taking out the garbage. Like that's not an emotional shadow well-being sort of thing. That's just a task. that needed to happen?
One thing I noticed once I started doing this work is the reason why I would run or numb the pain is because of the shame of the way I was acting down inside, and I couldn't put up with it. Just like, the gossip part you were talking about, Julia, like a lot of times, depending on the people, especially in the workforce, the only common ground you have is gossip, so you gossip. Now I just walk away most of the time when people start gossiping because I don't need to be a part of that. But I remember times where the gossip got so bad we were just talking about people that I would feel shame for acting that way to myself. And as soon as I got to my car, I would just start to use because I couldn't deal with it. And, a few words I would say at lunchtime stayed with me till I got off work. And now, like you were kind of saying, Julie, like now I recognize it. It's like, whoa, here we go. Stop, reflect a little bit if I can, and move forward. And I think for me, that's the dark side that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to admit that. Like, I know all the stuff that my running and numbing the pain was a lot of the stuff I created in my own head throughout the day. And as soon as the time to clock out, I was in the car getting high, then I started getting drunk because I said a lot of horrible stuff, not only to other people, but to myself. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what I was doing.
How many times did you gossip about someone? I'm going to hang on to gossip because gossip is absolutely a way I would use to feel better about myself after someone else did something stupid to make myself look good or at least feel better. Like I'm not that dumb for making that mistake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like throw someone under the bus, just railroad them. Behind their back, not in front of their face, because God, I would never do that. Then I would have to face it. But behind their, and then walk away after going, shit. Like, I should have never said half of that shit that I did. And like, you don't feel better about you do in the moment. It's like, it's like taking the first drink. It feels freaking great. And then afterwards you're like, fuck, why did I do that?
And then you go into the negative shame spiral of your shitty behavior. And then you like spark that self-talk and you're like, okay, I'm just going to drink because clearly I'm an asshole. And so you drink to make yourself feel better. Like this is, we've said this is a podcast about how to be happy, no alcohol needed. And I think that all of this shadow stuff, all of these behaviors were making us miserable. We were trying desperately to avoid feeling shame. And by doing so, we were just making ourselves more miserable and more unhappy. Another behavior that comes to mind is my complete overreaction to constructive criticism. Steve can probably vouch for this one. But so I do this thing. This is like I'm going to get really specific with you guys about like creepy, embarrassing behaviors that I'm not proud of because I think we need to like show what this looks like, right? So I'll receive constructive criticism. I'll get defensive. And I'll be like, oh, okay. And I will turn around and try to manipulate the other person into feeling bad that they ever criticized what I did. And I'm good at it. Like that is, it's like, it's creepy. And I catch myself now. So I don't do that. And I never recognized that that's what I was doing. Right? That was an automatic behavior. And I think that's what we need to recognize when it comes to shadow work and the dark side is this is automatic behaviors that we have built up as armor over the course of years since we were children to protect us. So when I was little and, my parents only approved of the good stuff, the high achieving, whatever, if anybody gave me if a teacher gave me constructive criticism, I would immediately see that as I'm failing. And so I'm going to fight back and I'm going to manipulate you so I would start crying and I would do everything I could to make them feel guilty so they would never make me feel shame again. Absolutely horrible. Even as an adult, I would still fall into that pattern. So again, with that's really embarrassing to even admit that that's the kind of person that I've been. But I think we all have behaviors that are like that. And it's in the facing them that we actually free ourselves because I didn't feel better when I started guilting this other person and feeling bad and whatever. It didn't make me feel happy. It's in owning it. So let's like switch this a little bit. how do you recognize when you're doing something that's unhealthy, one of these shadow type behaviors? How do you spot it and recognize it? Because these are all innate, almost instinctual at this point.
I think you bring up a good point. What you said there, though, is a lot of this stuff is what we learned when we were younger,
Mhm.
right? So this is not just like stuff we learned to survive while we were, actively drinking and enable that. This is the stuff we've done our whole lives to protect this us, not the shadow us, as you're saying here. I think that's a good thing to understand because, right, like this is your subconscious driving so much, right? So if you don't have the awareness to even think to look beyond, right, you're going to miss a lot of these things. You're going to think a lot of this stuff is normal.
Mhm.
And
Because
you
as we're
do
talking,
until you're like, why is this shit not working in my life?
that's right. Like that's what I was gonna say. There's,
Right?
there's certain things like where it's like
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff that I understand about myself is it's I know it's not normal, but like I still think it is. It is. It's just so much like I don't know. I don't know the right words to explain it right now, but like that is it there with it. Like, um, I lost my train of thought here, but
The
it comes
automatic
down to like
response.
right, like it's just what protects me, like protect the brand, protect whoever we are at all costs of not letting people see those other things with it. Yeah, cause I lost the main thought I had where I was gonna tie that in just went out the window, but
Okay, so I got
um,
two stories, unless you got something else there, Matt.
go for it.
Okay, two stories. One that's going to involve anxious attachment, because I think that's pertinent here for like the shadow self. I did not want to speak up for myself for fear of relationships or emotional attachment being pulled away from me. And so if you go back even farther, there's moments in my past where growing up, probably I've done something wrong or I did something bad and emotional attention was pulled away. And then that became a fear that I had. And then in response to that, I would try to not do those things, which would be a corrective behavior, but also abandon myself in the process because I did not want the emotional attachment or the emotional connection to be pulled away anymore. There's the beginning of Mr. Nice Guy and there's the beginning of uh, people pleasing. Both things. In that case, in that instant, when you're in a relationship and then you finally say something and then emotional attachment gets pulled away, all I want is more control. And then so what goes through my mind is, how can I manipulate the situation so that person comes back? Can I make them feel guilty, or can I create some sort of drama in my life that is going to require them to come back and save me from myself or save me from the shit that I just created? And I mean, I've done this. I have done this on purpose to Julie and then realized that that was something that I had to work through. And like, it was bad. My emotional attachment was bad. And to the point where I needed to talk about it. I needed to work through it. I needed to say a lot of nasty words that they felt nasty coming out of my mouth for sure.
They hurt
Complete
to say some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, I was bawling. I was absolutely crying. It took a long time for me to become okay with myself enough to be able to stand in conflict without worrying about my relationships fucking off on me. One of the things that I used to say to myself were, if you're listening out there, this is probably one that's going to be super common. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mhm.
When is that person going to leave? When is that person going to bugger off? And so you do everything in your power. I did everything in my power to prevent that from happening. And in doing that, I have found that in those relationships, respect is gone.
Mm. Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a good
have any
thing to
respect
notice.
from them at all because I've thrown myself under the bus along the way, and at some point it goes away and you start doing dumber and dumber things, make stuff up,
Mhm.
create something out of nothing so I could get that feeling of emotional safety back. And it really didn't work out. Second story I have here, and this one, and I didn't realize it was happening when it was happening, but I was at work and there was a supervisor who was super nice, did everything everybody asked, especially the bosses, did everything everybody asked him to do. He was buddy with all of the managers, would had no self-confidence really whatsoever, but came across as had the puffed out chest and all of that stuff. And that's how he made himself feel comfortable in all of these groups. And especially with the people that had more power than him. And when something didn't go right, he would just go and ask them for the answer and then carry on about life, like never really owning anything because somebody always made the decision for him. And they would coddle him. And it would piss me off. It drove me nuts so much. I really had to look at myself and I'm going, what is going on here that is driving this really, really big emotional reaction? And I realized that I was looking at the version of myself that I wasn't anymore.
Mhm.
I had outgrown the version of me that needed to do all of that stuff to feel comfortable in my position.
Mhm.
And I was at the point now where I was no longer really looking for approval. And I was no longer really trying to just please my boss so I wouldn't get in trouble. That sort of thing. And I was staring at the mirror image of the guy that I wasn't anymore, and it was driving me bonkers. Because I had so much of my own past that was that person, and I could see the hurt
Mhm.
in me
I think
while he was running around chasing all
for
of the approval and everything.
for our
Belonging.
listeners, I think that, to summarize that, that's a really important point Steve made there, where one of the ways you can spot your own shadowy behavior is if somebody does something and it absolutely drives you crazy, like some part of their personality trait or some behavior that they consistently do that just makes you really not like them and really
Mhm.
grates on your nerves. Really good chance that there's a part of you in that you don't like, that you don't want to acknowledge. And so that's one of the like foundational ways to notice your unhealthy behaviors.
It is the best way
Mhm.
to find out more about you than you'd like to know
For sure.
is if that person pisses you off, ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Fantastic way to like shadow work your way through. I wonder what the hell is happening here because my reaction says a heck of a lot more about me than it does about them.
Right. Right. What do you got, Robbie? What's coming up for you?
First, some of the things that, well, one of the things that came up was, you're talking about the manipulation. I used to, do the same thing when I was a kid to get love. I would manipulate myself to make me, like the world is ending type of thing, cry, do all that stuff just to get attention from my mom. I wouldn't do it so much for my dad because it didn't work. So that was one of the things that I was thinking about that, and it carried on to my adult life where if I didn't agree with what was going on, I would just go silent. And you guys know this, I'd just go silent. And I would
Mhm.
I would just play the game till someone asked me what was wrong. That's how I would do the manipulation part. And if you didn't ask what was wrong, you were out of my life. And
Mhm.
it it's very uncomfortable to, say those words out loud, but that's what I was doing because I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't have no one to talk to. It was the loneliness aspect, but I was doing it to myself. All I had to do was speak up, but I didn't know how, because every time I did speak up with my father, I was put down and don't feel these things, don't have these emotions, or I would get the drunk stupor, like, what are you talking about, from him. So I just learned to put that stuff away, and it's, in that shadow, it comes back. And some of the things I've found too is, Matt, you were talking about subconscious level. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I do subconsciously, and I ask myself why, and I get into a bad place because I don't have the answers, and I need to talk through with someone. I should not be doing this by myself. That's one thing I've also learned, is if it's really
Facts.
deep and it's like so deep in your subconscious and your, psyche, and you're like questioning that. I've learned to stop now and be like, I'm just going to dig myself a big, huge hole, and I'm going to freak out. And the shame's going to be so bad because I can't figure it out on my own. I just need to talk to someone. And that's where the connection is very important, I think. Sometimes when you hear people do shadow work, it depends. But then I've also heard other people, like, if you're getting really deep, you need to make sure you have someone that can help you through this, a mentor or a therapist or someone that knows about shadow work, because you might open some door and there's no going back. And you either, work your way through it, or you're going to go in a really dark place. And I just want the listeners to be conscious of that too. If you've got something that's so deep, and like you're trying to dig at it, and you're actually making it worse, you probably just need to go have a conversation with someone you trust. It may be overwhelming, but you're knocking on that door of a level that you may not be prepared for.
Definitely agree. And I think that the biggest danger with shadow work, the biggest danger with recognizing these behaviors that we're not proud of doing, is that it can trigger shame. And shame, again, we've been trying and trying and trying to avoid shame. So we've been ignoring all of these behaviors. We've been using these behaviors to try to avoid shame, and facing them absolutely can trigger shame. That's one of the first things that happens, is you're like, oh my God, how could I be such a horrible person? Right.
Yeah.
And I know that's where I went, especially the first time I realized I was actually using my kids to try to gain other people's approval. And the first place I went was like, that is horrifying. And that makes me hate who I've become. And I mean, I spiraled. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that probably a great direction to go from here is, how do we have compassion for ourselves so that we can pull ourselves out of the shame spiral that comes from that? Because I think for me, one of the most important things that I recognized was, I need to look at that behavior with no judgment. That behavior
Yep.
comes from, like Matt said, a childhood version of me who was just trying to save herself and protect herself and survive. A child who had no other options. And so those are the behaviors that I learned, and I carried them into adulthood without even recognizing it. It's not this horrible behavior that I'm choosing, actively making the decision to do. And so that helped me have some compassion for those behaviors, so I didn't just shame myself into a pit like Robbie's talking about. But I think that's something I would love to hear from you guys. How do you find the compassion piece so you don't launch yourself into a shame spiral that takes you down like a scary pit you can't dig out of?
I think for me, it's when you're doing the shadow work, it's like investigative work. And I try to use it through that lens. Like, if I was a private investigator and I'm trying to find the root cause of whatever the thing is, first I just go to the facts, and the facts have no emotions or no feelings. They're just the facts. Write down those facts of, what you're writing down. Then sometimes I have to sit on them because they're really deep, like you're saying, Julie, where the shame spiral will just go out of control. So I, find this one, I write it down, then maybe I stay away from it for a couple days and just kind of reflect and think through it. And sometimes I'll go and like, why, and do the whole why thing. But now I really just try to, okay, this is the facts. This is, where I believe it came from. Then where do I move forward? This is the part that I'm really bad at, is the moving forward part. And the self-compassion is like just giving myself some space. And if I got to be in the right place too, because if not, I'll go into that bad place of the spiral down of the shame. Or other times I'm like, shit, I got this. I know now. Now I can move forward. And that's one of those light bulb moments. And I wish those would, happen more than the latter, but it just doesn't work that way because it's the work we have to do. So that's where I'm kind of with the compassion part. It's like, hey, you got the facts, just kind of chill, work forward. Then, sometimes I just got to talk with someone else about it. Like, do you do this type of thing? Then if they do, it can go back and forth. But just for me, it's really the reflection part after that. And, the mantras I always say, I'm loved, it's okay, I'm going to get through this, those type of things. Because I know how I work. If I was to write this perfect story of how I want to be, that's not true. That's just fake. And I'm going to have the shame there from that story because I can't live that way that I just wrote down. So kind of a complicated way to talk about all this, but I don't have all the answers, but I know facts, reflect, talk when needed, and just whatever I can do for self-compassion. Take a moment, all those things.
It's a complicated subject for sure. Like there's no super simple, easy answer to any of this, but I do think it's good we're talking about it. Matt, what do you do? Like, how do you get to a place of having compassion for yourself when you notice like unhealthy behaviors?
So this is just like interesting. I sit here listening to you guys talk, like taking a step back and just listening. Like this whole thing is kind of like I get we're talking about like the shadow work of things, but I'm sitting and thinking like, isn't this like what normal people do? I'm just putting this out here right now because this is where my thoughts are. Like, I don't know. I feel like so much of this stuff we're talking about right now is like normal stuff in my life. And I don't know if
Was
that
it?
goes back. No, right? And that's what I was just gonna say. I don't know if it goes back to where Steve was saying about like the other people's behaviors and what's that say about you, right? Like I just quickly was jotting down here, like bringing this back to AA and your fourth step, right? You have these resentments towards people, places, whatever it might be, and you bring it back to what is it though, my role in this thing, right? And those are those things that Steve were talking about. What's driving my agenda here, right? Why I have these feelings of things, right? Recognizing it. I think for me is accepting it though. With getting into this is accepting it, like that, right? These were things we were conditioned very young in life by events that probably in most cases we couldn't control, right? Or we were taught something that was beyond where we were. But also the fact that like other people are going through the same thing. I think that's what this is going to dive down or boil down to for me with this is that like so often we think we're unique. We're the only one going through this. We're the only ones had these things happen to us. But that's really not the case. And I think that is really the biggest way that I'm able to give myself some space and some grace in this whole thing and accepting that I'm not the unique. I don't know. Monster's the word that came to my first thought right there, but I don't ever think that was the case. But the person I wasn't like intending to be or didn't want to be. Um, and just knowing that there's other people out there that are going through the same thing that I am, whatever that may be in life. And it definitely doesn't make it easier for me. It doesn't make it just simply go away, but I'll say it tones it down a little bit to at least step back and look at it in a different perspective.
Absolutely.
So the first thing that comes up after I was listening to Robbie and you, Matt, share was that even when we should begin to talk about like our past and growing up and whatever, this is not a blame thing. It isn't about blaming.
No.
It's just a recognition. And the reason why I bring this up is the acceptance part and the compassion part. If I'm blaming, I won't get compassion. I won't be able to give it to myself because I'm going to be expecting it to be cured from something beyond myself. I'm going to leave an expectation out there that somebody else is going to have to accept the blame for me to feel better about me. And we don't get to give that away. Matt, you said your part, the part that you play in it. So it's not a blame thing. It's a recognition of my past, what I did to protect myself, what I did to feel better, a belief that I have now engaged in to make myself more comfortable in whatever situation that I was in. And I get to say, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And so did my parents. And so did my ex-wife. And so did Johnny down the street. And so did Diane up around the corner. Like all of these people that have come through and passed in my life that have helped shaped the person that I was and the person that I am now. We all let these things come and go and decide what we're going to pick up and grab onto, subconsciously sometimes and consciously sometimes. That's the compassion. The compassion piece is that if I accept that I did the best I could with what I had at the time and what I knew, that was the best possible decision, even if it was the shittiest decision that I ever made, I still made it. It's still mine to own.
Mhm.
And if I can find compassion even in those moments, driving drunk all the time, not treating my kids the way I wished I would have, not treating my ex-wife the way I would have, like there is a laundry list of stuff that I've been ashamed of. The compassion piece shows up when I recognize that I played my part in those. And then I can really start forgiving myself and showing that compassion.
One thing you hit on there, Steve, is putting that stuff in the distance. Once we are able to do that, it stays in the distance, right? And it may pop up in every once in a while when some crazy circumstance. But I've learned once we put that in the distance and we don't look back, that stuff just goes away and we move forward in life. But the self-awareness to have compassion for yourself. Yes, I did do this. I was a part of this. You were a part of it with me, whatever it may be. But the more distance we can put on that, the better we become. And when it does happen, the faster we recognize it and we can stay away from it or do whatever reaction we need to do to it.
Yeah.
If we lived in that past, right, we all know we're going to continue that same story. And I like to think the farther I put it behind me, I don't even think about it. When it's, 100 miles behind me, it's going to take, 100 miles for me to go the wrong way for it to come back. Not always. It's going to come back, right?
Yeah.
Something's going to come back. But you're at peace with it at that point. So have fun catching up. That's what I like to say. If you can catch up, good luck, because I'm going to keep running.
No, I think that
Go for it.
everybody here has said something really important that's worth recognizing when it comes to compassion. Steve, you talked about driving drunk with your kids. Robbie, you talked about giving people the silent treatment. We know that we're not proud of those behaviors, right? Those are things that nobody wants to be like, yeah, when I'm mad, I give somebody the silent treatment until they ask what's wrong, right? Like that. But once
so
we
ridiculous.
can talk about it, it sounds ridiculous. There's listeners out here who are nodding like, yeah, me too, right?
Yep.
As soon as you start talking about it, and other people are like, yeah, I've done the same thing. I know how that feels. You can start lifting the shame. And then it becomes this thing you can talk about. I mean, I'll still, I've told you several things that I do that I'm like, ew, that's still embarrassing to say. It's not bringing me a whole bunch of shame though. I've taken those things. And like Steve said, I've learned, I've looked at, okay, that's who I used to be. Okay. That doesn't mean I was a horrible person. It means I didn't have any other skills. I didn't know what else to do. So that version of me did her best. Now I know more, I'm aware of more, I have more skills. Now I can take that and I can apply it and be a new version of me that doesn't do those things anymore. And when we talk about integrating your dark side or integrating your shadow self, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about recognize these behaviors, understand them. Almost always they come from some kind of wound, some kind of, emotional injury. And if you can understand that, then you can have compassion for the childhood version of you that learned that behavior and then you can learn to heal it and allow yourself to grow into a new version. And to reiterate what Steve said, this isn't about blaming. We can
Mhm.
experience an emotional wound from even our parents, somebody who absolutely meant all good things with all the love. And because of our personality, because of our past experiences, because of that particular situation and our emotional state in that situation, whatever it was that happened ended up wounding us in some way, right? Like a little mini trauma that happened. And that doesn't mean our parents are bad people. We're not blaming them. We're not blaming other people for our problems. We're just acknowledging this happens. Here's how I learned to respond to it. Now I'm going to do something differently. And I think that is a really important point. I just wanted to reiterate that Steve brought up.
I'm going to bring up one more point.
Uh huh.
On the flip side of this, we're all parents. We're all going to have children that are going to say the same stuff we're saying right now. And we're going to be on the other side of that saying, my mom did the best she could with what she had. My dad did the best he could with what he had. We're on the flip side of that, but we're not living it yet. It's going to happen.
Oh, I
Adult
know. I
children,
have a teenager who's like,
Yeah.
"You did this,"
right?
right?
Yeah.
I get it now.
No one wins anything when we blame.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
No one wins anything. We don't heal a wound. We don't find the next step. We don't. None of us win. I've lived the blame game for a really long time, and it just like alcohol, it works until it doesn't, and then you have to face yourself in the end.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so let's close this up. This has been a great conversation. I'm going to close it out with one question and let's see what everybody has to share here. If there's somebody listening right now that is having a hard time facing some part of their past or their personality that they recognize as unhealthy, and they're still feeling really ashamed of it, what would you say to them to help them maybe find the courage to face it?
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna drop a quote here for this one then that I found. It's a journey of self-discovery and healing, not to make the shadow disappear, but to learn how to coexist with it and fuel growth.
Perfect. That sums it all up beautifully. Absolutely.
That's
yeah,
integrating it right
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
wrapped up with a bow. I'm gonna say, um, I'm going to speak to myself because that was kind of what I had to do in the beginning was speak to myself because I was trying to find the words of like a lot of stuff, how to get through it. So one of the things, I always say everything's going to be okay. You're loved and we'll get through this. I always say will because I include my daughter because she's such a big part of my life that if I'm not well, she's not going to be well. So I put that in there. But the self-compassion part, we talked a lot about that. Advice would be just go easy on yourself. It's going to hurt. It's going to sting. You're going to bring up some crazy stuff and you're going to have to figure out how to work through it and like have someone in your back pocket that you can talk to because there's going to be some time where you're going to have to find someone to talk to. And I think that connection part is the biggest part is once you start getting in this and the shame starts coming up, you need to give a space and get those words out and hear them and let someone repeat them back to you so you can move forward.
Mhm. Yeah, very well said.
Mhm.
And to echo that, I think it's important to remember there's always an other side. How you feel right now is not how you're always going to feel. So if you end up in a dark place, because sometimes that does happen with shame, remember that you will come out on the other side and you will feel lighter and freer. And also, if you're struggling with facing a behavior that you know is unhealthy, that you're really ashamed of, uh, ask yourself what you would say to a friend or what you would say to the childhood version of you. Because we always have more compassion for friends. We always have more compassion for children than we ever have for ourselves. If I sat down and thought about if I was sitting down to a 7-year-old version of me who was embarrassed and ashamed because of a way that she was behaving, what would I say to her? Because I guarantee there's going to be a lot more compassion in that than maybe I can muster for myself sometimes.
For sure. what works for me now is understanding when I look at it and I say, is this something I want to keep doing? And if the answer to that is yes, my problem is solved. If the answer to that is no, then I have the opportunity to try something different. And so if I was to give anybody advice, ask yourself that question. If the answer is no, then you're good. If the answer is yes, then that's where you find someone to talk to. That's when you do some self-reflection. That's where you see and give yourself an opportunity with that compassion. I go, why do I keep doing this stuff to myself? And how can I change that? And it's going to be some work. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass to recognize that you're not as good at the thing that as you thought you were. The good part is you have a ton of opportunity to get better at it now that you recognize it. I want to say thank you, Robbie, and thank you, Matt, for joining us on the second episode of No Alcohol Needed. And I look forward to seeing you guys again. All of our listeners, please hit like, please hit subscribe. If you want to check out our guests, you can go to noalcoholneeded.net and look up their profiles. Julie, do you want to add anything more here?
I don't think so. I just want to say thank you guys for sharing openly and honestly. I know that the dark side is a little bit of a scary topic, so really appreciate your courage and your vulnerability today.
Absolutely, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.